Jim Geiger, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you too, John.
So I just actually twice now I've watched your documentary, Accidental Climber, and it's a story about your attempt on Everest back in 2014. The goal was to become the oldest American and actually the oldest great grandfather to summit Everest. So I
Right.
want to go back just a little bit in time. And how did mountaineering appeal to you? Because for me, it came through a friend. It was kind of a chance encounter to be able to go out and do my first climb. And then ever since then, I got hooked. So how did it all start off with you?
Well, fairly similar because I was 35 when I arrived in California from the Midwest. You know, the Midwest doesn't have much of anything going on. I went right by all the ones in Colorado out to the West Coast. And one vacation, we decided to drive up and down I-5. Well, Mount Shasta, Mount Hood, Mount St. Helens, Mount Rainier. I had never seen a snow-capped peak in my life. And, and this is the summertime. And so it touched something in me. And I didn't know I wanted to climb them yet until 5 years later when I met a guy named Steve and he said, hey, let's go up to this Sierra and let's do some climbs. And one led to another, and we finally got to Mount Shasta. Said, oh, yes, here we go. I couldn't wait to climb Mount Shasta. It was the first snow-capped peak I ever saw. And then it just took off from there. We kept climbing. Actually, it took me 9 years to get to the top of Mount Shasta. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I started out in cotton shorts and T-shirt. Oh, my God, no. My logging boots, of all things. And so I quickly learned there's another way to do this. And that just led to more adventures. And finally, when I turned 50, is when I think I'm good enough now to climb Mount Rainier. Well, little did I know that I was not in very good shape to climb Mount Rainier, even though I just climbed Mount Shasta. And then I started training, and I found a training hill that I went to, and just kept getting better and better. And then my guide friends from Mount Rainier said, hey, do you want to go to Kilimanjaro? Hey, do you want to go to Elbrus? Hey, do you want to go to Orizaba? Sure, here we go. And that's how it all started.
Yeah, for me, I had my friend. So he lives right outside Mount Sopris. He has a
Oh,
house,
yeah.
and so it pretty much like, hey, I have this mountain right in front of my house. Would you like to go climb it? And what I really enjoyed about it was the training process because it forced to put me on a schedule. And I found that my business, my personal life, and not only my spiritual life, it all kind of came in line due to having to train, to have this actual tangible physical goal in front of me. Did you have
Yeah.
something similar for you? What was the drive within you that went from going from Mount Shasta to Rainier and then going, yes, let's do Kilimanjaro, let's do Everest, let's do Van Missen? Like, what was that drive within you to keep pushing forward?
Very, very interesting you bring that up because what happened for me after I got back from Mount Rainier is how am I going to keep myself motivated? And so a year later, I scheduled a trip to Mount Whitney, and I asked 14 of my friends to go along. I got a permit for 15 people, and I was the leader, so-called leader, and off we went. But that whole year, I kept going back to my training hill every Saturday morning, up and down, up and down, up and down. And then at work, I would do the stairs at work. I worked on the 15th floor. And so I just kept this Mount Whitney back in my mind, and I was ready for Mount Whitney. Then I said, okay, we're going the next year and the next year. So I did Mount Whitney 22 years in a row. And so that was what kept me going and in shape enough to do the bigger ones around the world. So yeah, one little thing, Mount Whitney. Well, it's not actually a little bit. Yeah. That's kept me going.
I haven't gotten to do Mount Whitney yet. I'm actually really looking forward to it. But yeah, that's one of
Oh,
the things I like is it kind of forces you to stay in shape because you're kind of just they're building blocks. You're building on top of each other. And one thing I
right.
would notice is if I did go do a climb, I would get into a state like a month or two later where I'd start getting a little antsy. I'm like, I need that goal in front of me again. I need something to keep pushing me forward, you know? So
Yeah.
That's what it's been for me. So let's talk
Yep.
about getting ready to go to Everest, because in the documentary you meet this gentleman. You're down in Antarctica, I believe, and
Right.
you mentioned that you want to climb Everest, but you would actually never have the resources available to actually
Nope.
be able to do it. And then this guy all of a sudden offers you this opportunity. What was first off, how did all that come about? And then like, I guess the training and just like getting ready mentally to be able to prepare, like, okay, yeah, let's actually do this. When did,
Well,
when did that start
yeah,
off?
let me back up to when I met this gentleman in Antarctica. I had just come off of Mount Vincent unsuccessfully. I hadn't acclimated well, and it just wasn't my day. But coming back, oh, geez, I'm never going to be able to afford to come back here. I can't go to Everest. And so I was kind of bummed. And I went for lunch to the mess tent on Union Glacier, and it just packed with people from doing whatever they're there to do, first degree ski or South Pole or first ascent or whatever. And I was just getting ready to leave the mess tent, and there was this revelry going on at one of the tables near the exit where I had to get out. Well, I had to go right by the table, and I had just gotten out of my chair, and there was like only one other empty chair in the whole mess tent right at that table. And I get this little small sweet voice says, "You got to sit in that chair." Okay. Well, I normally don't sit at a table with strangers, but that little voice was strong enough to say, "You got to sit in that chair." And so I sat down, and next to me was this gentleman, Andy, and the rest of the table was toasting themselves, "Ostarovia, Ostarovia," all Russian, you know. And he happened to speak English. And so we got to talking. "What's going on here?" "Oh, we just got back from the South Pole. How about you?" And the story ends up that, "Well, I've been to Everest Base Camp, but I couldn't afford to go to the top." "Well, I'll fund you. And I'll mean it." And so within 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I had almost $250,000. Holy smokes. And we never had a contract. We only shook hands. I kept sending the bills and they kept being paid. So, okay. I mean, it was unbelievable. And he supported me the whole time. This was 15 months before I left for the 2014 expedition. And I already had a trainer, and I got back home and I said, "TJ, guess what? We're going to Everest." "Well, you got to get me ready for Everest." And so that started that process of me training 3, 4, 5 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week, sometimes doubles. But it just was what I needed to do. TJ helped me set out the whole program for how to get ready. And I was in pretty good shape by that time, but man, we're going to Everest. And so how do we get in awesome shape at age 68 to get ready for Everest? And I did. I got myself in the best shape of my life, actually, where I was ready. So it was just a continuous, and the mental part really had to kick in because I don't want to go do this workout today, but I got to go do it anyway. And I did. Yeah, all up here.
Absolutely. It's so everything about climbing and actually working out is mental, that I've learned.
For
Kind of,
sure.
I think Goggins has like a thing. I don't know if you know who David Goggins is, where it's like most people, it's the 40%. Most people shut down at 40%, and you can actually push through that. And once you physically learn where your 40% is, it's actually really incredible what the human body can accomplish. What would
Yes.
you, go ahead?
I'm just agreeing with you. Very, very well said.
Oh, yeah. What would you say would be like the biggest changes that you made in your training regimen, going from like a Rainier or a Achille or a Van Missen or Elbrus training, and then you're actually scaling up to Everest? Would like Aconcagua be the closest that you could say? But what would be the biggest thing that you had to focus on in order to level up to be able to go to the Himalaya?
I would have to, it certainly boils down to endurance. Can I keep going for 12, 15 hours a day? And as you get higher and higher on mountains, it just takes more and more effort. And so to have that reserve and know how to eat, be sure you're hydrated, and it all comes down to to having enough glucose in your body that can be converted to energy in that moment. And that's all about training the body to be able to process glucose very, very efficiently. And certainly the fat part of it is where the energy comes from in converting fat to glucose, and then of course the ATP. On you go. So learning how to do that, and we did that a lot through strength training. Worked heavy on the legs. I did the stairs at work. I did lots of cycling trips and lots of climbing. I climbed 12 mountains that year, 15 months before I went to Everest. So I think the other piece, which I was really surprised, is we got to do upper body strength training too.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm carrying a 60-pound pack. Okay. We got to get the back strengthened. We got to get the core strengthened. Got to get the arms strengthened. You can pick up the dang pack. So all this was part of the regime that we had that wasn't part of the other mountains that I was doing. So I got very strong upper body and very strong legs. And then about a week before I was going, he had prepared this test. Okay, Jim, we're on the test machine. We've been doing 1,200 pounds. Okay, we started at 800, did that, 1,000, did that, 1,200, oh yeah. Then he puts on 4 more plates. Okay, now we're up to almost 1,400 pounds. Got that one done. Then he adds 4 more. Now we're up to 1,600 pounds. I couldn't budget initially. Then he says, you got to find that source of your energy deep down. And I let out a yelp. The whole gym was, what's going on? And it moved. And I pushed the 1,600 pounds 15 times. I said, wow, I'm ready for Everest. That was his test for me. It was actually a mental test. But where does that energy come from? You got to find it. It's down there someplace. You just have to call on it. And it was there. So he said, you're ready for Everest. Here we go. It was awesome.
Besides drawing the mental strength from physical training, did you do like any like meditative or spiritual exercises as well in order to get your mindset?
Well, I'm connected spiritually to my Heavenly Father, but I had myself a life coach. Worked for every week for months on just getting the mental part. And one of the biggest things she said to me was that you need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And you're uncomfortable a lot on the mountains. You just have to suck it up and be comfortable with being uncomfortable most of the time. Because it doesn't get easy the higher you go. It just gets more difficult. And that was the big thing for me, was that I had this dialed in to be able to put up with some of the stuff that was coming along on a regular basis. Because as you know, the mountain lets you climb it. Yeah. If it doesn't want you to climb it, you're not going that day. And so a lot of that happened. Weathering, hunkering down, stuck in a tent for days on end, and whatever comes along, you got to deal with. And that's the mental preparation that I went with my life coach. And my trainer was always on top of me with my mental attitude. And that's what I needed. So what I have is called a team Geiger. And my trainer, my life coach, my chef, all these things, my chiropractor, my massage therapist, we're all part of Team Geiger, along with my church family and my friends. That's how I got this done. It's not a solo effort going up to Everest, believe me.
Yeah, having that core team around you is absolutely vital. I want to talk about the Kumbu Icefall. What was that experience like? Because from a lot of people that I talked to, that's one of the toughest parts of getting through Everest is just that initial, part going from base camp to Camp 1. What was that experience like for you?
Well, the day before the avalanche was my first sortie into the icefall. And it is just a jumble of big, huge chunks of ice. Ladders everywhere, and just the whole thing is roped. They got a fixed line all the way up, which is salvation for many people that kind of fall. Luckily, I didn't fall off any ladders. But I got about halfway, and I still hadn't acclimated as well as I wanted to. And I said, we got to turn around. I want to make sure I get back. And we were quite a ways from base camp. And that experience taught me that I was as prepared as I could be. I just needed to acclimate more, and I would be able to get through the ice fall. It just takes a long time, sometimes 8 to 10 hours or more to get through one way through the ice fall. So that is by far the most difficult part of the mountain that I experienced, but of course I didn't get up any higher than that. But it's just a huge jumble of gigantic blocks of ice as big as houses, just immense. And there's no rhyme or reason why they have the route where the route is, just that's the easiest way to get up. And the icefall doctors are miraculous magicians putting that thing in place.
So do teams usually, would you go, say, for example, to Camp 1 and then like go back down like on your initial trip through? Because I'm sure you don't go just from base to Camp 1. You go to Camp 1 and then you turn back around and come back down to base and then go back again, or you're supposed to go back again later and then start like kind of caterpillaring your way up the mountain.
Well, that's exactly right. We're scheduled to go through the icefall 6 times. Okay. Up and then back is just one. So up and back 6 times by the time we actually head up to Camp 4, the high camp before we summit. And so this is a up and back, up. Further, you go to Camp 2, back down. Camp 3, come back down. So it's up and down to really fully acclimate so you can go beyond 24,000 into the death zone and actually survive. So that's the process. And we added, my team has actually added Lobuche Peak East as an additional acclimation climb, which we did before we got back to the Everest Base Camp. We did that like a few days before, and then we actually went to base camp again. So that was a nice, and I got to the top of Lobuche Peak East at 20,075 feet. And I said, okay, but it just took me longer than I thought it should, and so I wasn't acclimating as fast as I wanted to. At 68, it just takes longer. So it is what it is.
Yeah, that's one thing I tell a lot of people. They're like, why does it take 2 or 3 months to go and climb Everest? I'm like, first off, it's acclimation. And you're not climbing the mountain one time. You're climbing it 3, 4, 5 times because you're having to continuously go up and down in order to get acclimated. I know this is a tough subject to talk about, but the day of the avalanche, what were you supposed to be climbing that day? I know you had just been in the Kumbu Icefall the day before, so I'm predicting, or I'm guessing that may have been a rest day for you, but what was that day like? And then how did the events unfold? Because I remember hearing about it, watching it on the news, and you're actually the very first person I've ever talked to that was there that day.
We were scheduled for a rest day that day on the 18th of April. The 17th was when we went in, and then scheduled to go back up through the next day on the 19th. It was about 6:20 in the morning, and we all had our individual tents. We're all still, some of us were awake, some weren't awake. But the Sherpa team, the 25 people that were in that Sherpa team, were already gone like 3 o'clock in the morning. They were gone, and they were in that icefall or the avalanche area at 6:20 when this big crash happened. We heard it. It was pretty loud. And we just said, well, there's another avalanche, because the avalanches are occurring all the time. Something's always sloughing off. And so, but then the difference was that we heard all the radios going off. Oh my goodness, something's going on here. Because not only our company's radios, but all the company's radios were going off. You could hear this talking back and forth to the guys in the area up near the avalanche. And so we all hurried up, got dressed, and went to the mess tent, because that's where we all congregate. We can hear what's going on, and we get the feedback. Well, what's happened? Oh, there's 1 death at least, and then, oh, now there's 2. And the numbers kept rising and rising. And then pretty soon we heard the helicopters coming in. And then they would fly into the ice fall. They just actually disappear. You couldn't see them. They got in that low to drop a line, and then they hooked up the line to the harnesses, and they pulled out the guys by the harness and brought them back into the base camp to the helipad. Then our team had a doctor, physician, a cardiologist, who then checked the bodies to make sure that they were actually dead, or if they were alive, great. But the survivors were actually flown off in the helicopter cockpit. The guys that they assumed were dead had the harness and lifted by a long line back to base camp.
So they took the survivors out of the helicopter straight back to Kathmandu, I'm sure, as quick as possible.
Well, they eventually took the survivors, then hightailed it back to Kathmandu, or maybe down to Farishay at the hospital where they get repaired. But I could only watch 5 of the bodies being flown off, and I said, I got to go back to my tent.
Yeah, absolutely. What was because I know after that, there was probably a lot of questions like, can we still climb? Should I still climb? Maybe this is a message from a higher power. Maybe I shouldn't climb. How was the decision made to close it down for the rest of the year? And like, what was the attitude on the ground between the climbers, not necessarily between the clients? Because I know a lot of these guys like yourself have put up to $250,000 in order to be able to climb there. Was it more of a sense of like a respect for like those who had fallen and like they understand, or was it mixed? Or I'm just curious.
Well, initially the companies had decided that we're going to continue to climb, and this went on for days. You know, we all stayed. I was going with my guide. We would do sorties up Pomori just to get higher and higher in Pomori, and I was actually doing pretty well. I was getting more fully acclimated by continuing to climb, waiting for the word that we're going to go up the mountain, up Mount Everest. And there was a faction of the Sherpa that just did not want to do this because there's still 3 bodies left in the ice. And they wanted to honor and respect the bodies that were still left there because they still had their spirit with them for 46 days, is what I'm understanding. And so we couldn't climb through that section without desecrating that reverence for those bodies. And so there's a part of the Sherpa wanted to climb, part of the Sherpa didn't want to climb, and so they had a puja where they had a discussion of how to continue or not continue. And then we heard that there's a radical faction of the Sherpa. It's not the best word, but there was some Sherpa that were really adamant about not climbing, and they were insisting that nobody's going to go climb through the icefall. And instead of having this animosity continue, the company started saying, well, this is not a good idea, so we're not going to go. And then the Ministry of Tourism came up, flew them up there. They had this discussion, how are we going to deal with this? And I think it was on the 24th of April, we're shutting it down, and then the 25th is when I went back down. Yeah, so it closed. Nobody's climbing. Nobody climbed that year except one Chinese woman that flew up to Camp 2 and actually got to the top.
Yeah, I saw that. She actually got an asterisk for that one, but they still gave her the certificate. Yeah, because I can only imagine, you know, because the Sherpa community, I mean, you're talking about brothers, sisters, uncles, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And actual family members. So it's a lot more personal for them than it would for the clients themselves that are there.
Yeah, John, let me add one thing, because the clients that I was with, probably half of us we're deciding, well, we're going to go home anyway, but the other half wanted to climb. But at the end, we all came together and said, we honor the decision of the Sherpa, because out of respect for them and their families. We had to do that.
And it's their mountain, so.
Well, yeah, exactly.
As well. So to kind of wrap this up, what advice do you have? Actually, I'm going to do this 2 parts. What advice do you have for people that are interested in climbing, or young, or like people that are newer to climbing, like myself? What advice could you give me moving forward. Besides, I've done the turnaround, so I've learned that. I've got that down. When I'm not, feeling the summit or weather conditions, knowing when to turn around. But other than that, what advice could you give for the next generation of climbers?
Well, you have actually picked up on a good one, because as we talked about, the mountain will let you climb it. And if it's not ready, you do not want to go anyway, because you're going to get yourself in trouble. And you hear about all the deaths every year on Rainier and Hood and other mountains in lower 48 that they shouldn't have been there in those conditions. And so they get killed. So yes, respect the mountain, have respect for yourself, be sure your safety is always number one. How can I be the best safety as I can bring to this mountain with me and my friends who I'm climbing with? Always be concerned about safety first. So that would be number one, and then get in the best shape you can, because if you get caught in a situation where you're almost up to the top, you still got to get back down, because going down is not an option. Going up is an option. Getting back down is not an option. You got to get back down. So it's all about getting in good physical condition, paying attention to safety, learn how to eat and drink properly on the mountain, have the best equipment you can have, do not have any cotton whatsoever. And there's lots of great equipment out there for cheap. You can find it all over the place. But get the best equipment you can, and pay attention to what mountain's showing up. Which one am I supposed to be climbing next? And then just get yourself in great shape and learn about it and what the route is, get the best guide service you can. And then it's fun, because I like the preparation more sometimes than the actual climb. When I get back down, I said, yes, I just got that done. That's the best. But the whole year of preparation is awesome. And I love it. And then going to a new country, I really called the mountain the excuse for going to some incredible places. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the adages I like to say in my head is you can either suffer in the gym or suffer on the mountain. I mean, so that's one of the ones I like. And then for people that aren't climbers, what do you want them to take away from watching your documentary, from hearing your story?
Well, my whole purpose in climbing at 68 was to show everybody that you can age well. And I believe that aging well is imperative if you want to have the last years or last decades, I should say, of your life being pretty enriched. I don't want to be in a wheelchair or a walker or a cane. No, I want to be enjoying life, being able to get myself up another mountain. It doesn't have to be a 20,000-foot peak, but being able to do these things physically, I think, are really important. And there's two things that I think are vitally important as you age well. One is having a purpose for reason to get out of bed in the morning. And my purpose is to show people you can age well. And then secondly is that you have to move with intensity where you're breaking a sweat. Those two things, having a purpose and moving with intensity, are the best things you can do to age well, in addition to sleeping and eating and all this good stuff. But those two, I think, are the most important. So what's your Everest? I had mine. What's your Everest that's going to keep you going, getting out of bed in the morning, and then moving with intensity? That's what I would want to leave with you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jim. Jim Geiger, everybody's accidental climber, now streaming on video on demand. Definitely check it out. All the links are below. Thank you for joining me.
John, thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.